So good morning, all of you. We are going to continue from where we left, and that is the endocrine system. Before we go into that, let's first do a question. A simple question, just to brush you up. Any questions from what we did in the last class, you can ask. Okay, B, and I've got A also, and I've got C also to this. What I thought was a very simple question. All right. In which organ of the body lymphocyte cells are formed? So lymphocytes, along with all blood cells, this is what we spoke about earlier, they are formed in the long bones of the body. Why the long bone? Because this is where bone marrow is found. We have bone marrow being the source of all the red blood cells, and this bone marrow is formed in the long bones. Okay, so answer is B. The correct answer is B. Then going to your endocrine glands. We had studied what was the endocrine gland. Can you brush that definition up for me? Can you tell me what you remember about endocrine glands? What we spoke about yesterday? What are the endocrine glands? These are the endocrine glands of the body. We have hypothalamus, pituitary, parathyroid, thyroid, adrenal gland, pancreas, ovaries and testes. Of course, ovaries and testes both cannot be present in one person. It was going to be either or, either ovaries or testes. Together, they are called the gonads or sex organs. Sex organs or gonads, that is the name for ovaries and testes together, right? One person can have either ovaries or testes, that will be determining their sex. Okay. So Diksha has said that ductless glands for hormone secretion. Okay, and Deepti has also said hormone secretion. Okay. So yes, we are talking about hormones being secreted, and their main property is that they are secreted without the duct. So there are no ducts or tubes carrying these particular hormones, and that would mean that the hormones are going to be secreted directly in blood. That's their main property. So we're going to do this portion in a little bit of detail. We're going to talk about these different glands and what are the things which are being produced from these glands. outside the organ, no duct, internal communication and regulation. Yes, secrete directly into the blood. That is the main point. Very good. So we'll start with these glands one by one, right? Obviously, we are not studying all the hormones which human body produces, because of course there are many hormones, and from the brain actually there are many smaller uh, hormones produced in smaller quantities. So we'll not go into that exactly, but overall for most of these glands, the major portion and their function, that is what we are going to be covering here. We will start with the first one, which is hypothalamus. अच्छा, स्क्रीन डार्क करना था ना आपको. I've tried to make a darker PPT, and we have also tried to add some lights to this venue. So hopefully you should be having a little bit less problem today. There are two hormones released here. One is called releasing hormone, and the second one is inhibiting hormone. Releasing hormone and inhibiting hormone. What happens is, hypothalamus is a part of the brain, and the hypothalamus, it releases hormones which are going to be affecting the pituitary gland. This is another part of the brain, and for pituitary to be able to do its function, you first need hormones from the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus will give its hormones, and then the pituitary will start doing its job. Okay. So, how are these two related with pituitary? Hypothalamus का जो releasing hormone है, when this is given out, then pituitary starts giving out its secretion, and inhibiting hormone does the opposite. The effect is opposite. When inhibiting hormone releases, then pituitary will stop doing its function. This promotes it to release the hormone. Inhibiting will, by its name you can understand, it will promote it to stop the secretion. Okay, so write this down first. Hypothalamus and then releasing hormone. Releasing hormones. It stimulates the secretion of hormones it stimulates the secretion of hormones from the pituitary gland, and inhibiting hormone stops the secretions from the pituitary gland. Inhibiting hormone stops the secretion from the pituitary gland. Now, this pituitary gland can be divided into two portions. One is interior and the other is posterior. So this anterior and posterior, technically this is like the front and the back of the gland. Both of these parts are going to produce their own hormones. We will first talk about anterior pituitary. In anterior pituitary, the first hormone we have is called growth hormone. The first hormone we have here is the growth hormone. So growth hormone is for overall growth and development of the body. The most easiest way in which it is manifested is in the form of height. So if growth hormone in a person is more, the person will grow more, right? If the levels are abnormal, then abnormally large person, very tall and very extra well built, like somebody like Khali. That kind of a stature is because of the excess production of growth hormone, right? And if it is less, then the person is going to be abnormally less, below the normal levels, then the person will be the dwarf, bone jo log hote hain. That is an abnormality of the growth hormone. Okay. All the hormones in the body are supposed to be at a normal balance level. There is a range in which they can fluctuate, but they're supposed to be at that level. Any alterations more or less will be manifested in the form of some disease, some condition. Right? Write down growth hormone. Growth hormone. It is needed for overall growth and development. Overall growth and development of an individual. Next is prolactin. Prolactin. This is for formation of milk. Please write down. Prolactin is for formation of milk. Now, of course, you might be wondering that if it is for formation of milk, will it be there in everybody? Actually, it will be. All your hormones, they are available in all individuals. Males, females, young, old. It's just that their amount is variable. This prolactin hormone, this is going to be at the highest level in females who are actually lactating. Okay, lactating females who are supposed to be breastfeeding, they are the ones in whose body we will have the highest amount of prolactin. But it does not mean that it's not there in others. It is there in all other organisms also. Okay. Then we have thyroid stimulating hormone, or as it is called, TSH. Thyroid stimulating hormone or TSH. Now the name should tell you what it is going to be doing. It is being released from the pituitary, but its job is to stimulate the thyroid gland. TSH will be released, and it's only after the release of TSH that the thyroid will be doing its function. The thyroid will start releasing its hormone once pituitary has given it a signal in the form of TSH. So write this. It stimulates, TSH stimulates the thyroid gland to release its secretions. Then Next is adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH. Adrenocorticotropic hormone or ACTH. Just like TSH stimulated the thyroid gland, we have ACTH stimulating the pituitary, from the pituitary to the adrenal glands. Okay, adrenal glands are present on top of the kidneys. For kidney, we use the word renal. So adrenal is derived from there. So adrenal glands will start working. They'll release their hormones on the stimulation from the pituitary gland. Write down adrenocorticotropic hormone. It stimulates the secretions from the adrenal gland. It stimulates the secretions from the adrenal gland. Next is luteinizing hormone or LH. Luteinizing hormone or LH. It stimulates the secretions. It stimulates the secretions of sex hormones. Stimulates the secretion of sex hormones from the gonads. Stimulates the secretion of sex hormones from the gonads. Next is, and the last one here, follicle stimulating hormone or FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone or FSH. This is now going to help in production of the sex cells. That is sperm and ovum, the cells which are needed for reproduction. Their formation is assisted by follicle stimulating hormone. Okay. So you can write this down. They help in the development of eggs and sperms. They help in the development of eggs and sperms. So these are the 6 hormones of interior pituitary. Now see, checking these levels of hormones can give you a lot of idea about various things. Like you might have had an idea that people sometimes they go and they check, get their fertility levels evaluated. People who are trying to conceive, they will be made to do certain tests. So 2 of those tests would be these, checking the levels of LH and FSH. The levels of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone will give an idea about the specific developments of the reproductive system. Luteinizing hormones tell us about the level of sex hormones in the body. And follicle stimulating hormone, that is supposed to be helping in production of eggs and sperms. So if suppose this level is abnormal, FSH level is abnormal, then we will know that the formation of eggs and sperms in the body, that is also going to be impaired. So it can give you a correlation with the fertility of the person. Okay. Let's go to posterior pituitary. Posterior mein only 2 hormones are there, so less things for you to learn. First one is oxytocin. First is oxytocin. Oxytocin does a lot of different things in the body. It is the common hormone of a lot of physical stimulus, like expressions like hugging and kissing. At that point of time, oxytocin is released, oxytocin is produced in the body. But the major function, the major role which it plays is during childbirth. So that's what we will be mentioning. Oxytocin, and you can write down, oxytocin is released during childbirth. It is the hormone which is released during childbirth. Because of its role in childbirth, in certain medical emergencies, we can also give oxytocin from outside to trigger childbirth. Suppose there is a person who is due and cannot actually go into labor. So muscle contraction is not taking place. So to induce labor in that person, there also we can give oxytocin from outside. The second hormone is vasopressin, or called by another name, antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. What does this hormone do? I hope you remember the function of kidney. The kidney is supposed to manage the waste and the water part. Now whatever water comes into it, some of it will reabsorb in the body. Depending on what is the requirement of the body, it will reabsorb it into the body. So that function of reabsorption of water, that is done by ADH. Okay, so write down vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. It helps in the reabsorption of water from the kidneys. Reabsorption of water from the kidneys. Okay. Now think of a situation if I tell you what happens when this is less. If we have less ADH in the body, what happens in that case? Right? There is a disease I want to mention here specifically because this disease can be commonly confused with another disease. Diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus Now, diabetes insipidus is responsible for or is a condition where ADH is deficient. ADH is deficient, that means that less reabsorption of water. Less reabsorption means more water is lost. If you are not going to reabsorb water from the kidneys into the blood supply, then that means that you are losing that water. And losing that water means that the urine formation is going to be more. So the person with diabetes insipidus, the one symptom they will experience would be frequent urination. And along with frequent urination, because their body is not able to get the water which was needed, the person will also feel thirsty. Okay, you should be able to correlate things like this. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So that, because the question usually doesn't come very direct, it will be in the form of correlation only. Okay, so diabetes insipidus, you remember this as a contrast to the normal diabetes which you know. We'll talk about that also. That's also an endocrine disease. So that diabetes is for sugar. This is the diabetes insipidus. This is for the deficiency of ADH. Okay. Vinita has asked how pituitary gland stimulates every other gland. See, in the body there are systems called feedback mechanisms. Okay, hormones, they are going to be having a feedback mechanism which will determine that there are receptors there within the body which kind of manipulate or kind of manage this, that if the level of one thing increases, the level of the other correspondingly will increase or will decrease. Like we did these two hormones here. So, when releasing hormones increases, then pituitary's hormone will also increase. That's their feedback. So, once the level of one decreases, the level of other will also decrease. Okay, it's a chain, it's a cyclic process in that sense. Inhibiting hormone, on the other hand, it has the effect that when inhibiting will be increasing, the hormones from pituitary, they will decrease. Okay, so they are connected channels managed by a group of receptors which are sensitive to the effect of these hormones, and that's how this is being regulated. Okay, and it is not every organ. You've mentioned every organ, so it is not every organ, but some of the organs are there which we have mentioned here. Okay, let's go to our next gland, which is thyroid gland. Now, thyroid gland is one gland which is at a very difficult situation right now around the world. A lot of people have thyroid related diseases. So let's first see what does the main secretion here, which is thyroid hormone, what does it do? Its other name is thyroxine. Can you tell me where we have studied thyroid or thyroxine before? If you remember, anything we know about thyroid hormone or thyroxine, which you can tell me? This is a hormone which is very important for processing different things in the body. So the word which we use is metabolism. So metabolism means acquiring nutrient, processing it, that means breaking it down and then using it, and finally when we are going to be eliminating it, that whole cycle of a nutrient, that is what is metabolism. And thyroid gland and this thyroid hormone is very important in doing that metabolism process. Okay. Yes, so you're mentioning iodine and iodine deficiency. That's very good. Iodine is a component of this hormone. Okay, the structure of thyroid hormone contains iodine, right? That is why it was associated with iodine deficiency, because when iodine would be less, then this will also become less. Okay, write down thyroid hormone and thyroxine. It's actually very good to see that you remember. Nice. Thyroid hormone or thyroxine, it is involved in the metabolism of carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Now see, because it is involved in metabolism, its alteration will also be reflected in that way. Suppose the levels of this are more. Okay, so the levels of thyroid hormone are more in the body. That means metabolism will be faster, at a better pace. So faster means that the body will always be in a very active state. Person will be feeling hot, the person will be sweating, the person will be having a high heart rate, and because everything, all the nutrients are being processed immediately the moment the person is eating, then that would also mean the person would ultimately end up losing weight. Because of that abnormality, there's going to be loss of weight. On the other hand, if thyroid function is less, okay, if thyroid is functioning at a lesser level, then that means whatever a person is eating, whatever nutrients they are getting, they are not being processed. Okay, so this person's, because the metabolism is going to be slow, this person will be feeling cold, this will be slow and will be putting on a lot of weight. Okay, so when somebody mentions that I have a thyroid disease, it is important to go into that and ask, do you have an increased function or do you have a reduced function? We have terms for that. Hypothyroidism. Okay, when the production is less, and hyperthyroidism when the production is more. Hypo and hyperthyroidism, not just thyroid. Saying the fact that I have thyroid doesn't make any sense, because everybody has thyroid, right? It's a gland which is an inherent part of your body. So you should know what is the kind of situation with the thyroid gland. We go further to the next one, which is the parathyroid gland. The hormone is with the same name. Parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone. This you can write down. Parathyroid hormone is associated with metabolism of calcium and phosphate. It is associated with metabolism of calcium and phosphate. Now, metabolism of calcium and phosphate, how that works is, if we have an increased amount of parathyroid hormone in the body, we will also have increased levels of calcium. Okay, and at the same time we will have a reduced level of phosphate. Increased calcium and reduced phosphate. On the other side, if we have a reduced amount of parathyroid, we will also have a reduced amount of calcium and an increased amount of phosphate. So parathyroid and calcium have a direct relationship, whereas with phosphate there is an inverse relationship which is going to be taking place. Okay. So for processing calcium and phosphate in the body, we have the parathyroid gland. Next we have the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland also, it has two parts. We can divide it into two parts. One is cortex. The second is medulla. This is like the interior and the outer parts of the gland. Adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. First, we'll talk about adrenal cortex. So adrenal cortex, it produces two hormones. One is glucocorticoid and by its name, the word gluco in it, you should understand that this is going to be helping in processing the carbohydrates. So glucocorticoids, it helps in carbohydrate metabolism. It helps in carbohydrate metabolism. It is also called cortisol. It helps in carbohydrate metabolism and it is also called cortisol. Second is mineralocorticoid, or it is also called aldosterone. This one will regulate the amount of water in the body. The amount of water and minerals in the body, they are going to be regulated by mineralocorticoid or aldosterone. How this will affect is ultimately this amount of water and this amount of minerals, they're going to be there in the blood. So that means the quantity of blood will be regulated along with the fact that the pressure of blood will be regulated. So out of the many reasons in the world for fluctuations in blood pressure, presence or absence or you can say levels of aldosterone are also one of them. Okay. So write down mineralocorticoid. Mineralocorticoid regulates the amount of water and minerals, in the body. The amount of water and minerals in the body. Then we have adrenal medulla. This also has two hormones, but their working is slightly different in the sense that they are going to be working together. They have a complementary relationship. They work together and they work in emergencies. Whenever there is an emergency in the body, so you have adrenaline and noradrenaline. Adrenaline and noradrenaline, they are the two emergency hormones of the body which are released from adrenal medulla. Now, what kind of emergencies are we talking about? Suppose the person is in danger. Aspects where it will be reflected will be in emotions of or in situations of extreme fear, being frightened, extreme excitement. You might have heard the word adrenaline rush being used with a lot of adventure sports. So adventure sports it means that there is some level of fear, there is some level of excitement, right? And there can be a bit of anxiety also. So at all those times we have these hormones being produced and they are going to be doing things like increasing the heart rate so that blood supply is optimum, making sure that the eyes are, the pupils are, wide open, things like that, which need an organism to be alert. Okay, write this down. Adrenaline and noradrenaline, we'll write them together. They are emergency hormones. They are emergency hormones which are released at the time of anger, fear, being frightened, or extreme excitement. Okay, one last gland is left, which is your pancreas. So if you remember, we studied pancreas to be giving us some secretions in the digestive system also. Okay, we studied some enzymes being released from the pancreas. Now that is the exocrine function of pancreas. Here we will be talking about the endocrine function of pancreas, making pancreas a mixed gland. This is the special property of pancreas. It is a mixed gland, that is endocrine plus exocrine. Both the functions pancreas will do. So it is a mixed gland. Here we are going to talk about the two hormones which are released from pancreas. One is insulin. So do you remember anything which we have discussed for the insulin? Any idea? Where we read insulin earlier, if you can track that and let me know. The second hormone is glucagon. Now, in your body, if you remember, we studied a process where we said that all the body's energy is supposed to be produced with the help of glucose. So glucose is the main source of energy, and when this glucose is not being used in the body, okay, if it's not being used and it is extra, what the body does is it stores it in the form of glycogen. This glucose, when it is extra in the body, it is stored in the form of glycogen. Okay, so that whenever it's needed in future, the body can utilize it. Right? Now, how do these hormones help in this process? Glucose is converted to glycogen with the help of insulin. And when we need glycogen to come back and form glucose, in that process, we need glucagon. So insulin helps in changing or helps in taking glucose to become glycogen, and glycogen to glucose back is done by glucagon. Okay, so you are telling me that it is a globular protein. That's actually very good. I'm glad you remember that. Polysaccharide to exactly ye to nahi hai. But the chemical nature of insulin is that insulin is a globular protein. We did this example that some hormones are proteins, and the example of that is insulin. Okay. Now, what does it mean for the blood? When insulin will be coming into play, glucose from the blood will be taken out and will be stored as glycogen. Okay, so that means blood glucose level will be reduced. In the normal terminology, we also say that this is a blood sugar. Glucose ki jagah we can use the word sugar also. It's a normal terminology. Okay. So write down about insulin. Insulin reduces blood glucose levels. Insulin reduces blood glucose levels. And glucagon increases blood glucose levels. Glucagon increases blood glucose levels. Now the second type of diabetes which I was telling you about, that comes into the picture here. We have diabetes mellitus, which is for the deficiency of insulin in the body. If we will have insulin deficiency, that means you will not be able to manage your blood glucose. So we can say this is a condition of increased amount of blood sugar. This diabetes should not be confused with diabetes insipidus. That's why I've mentioned these two diseases especially. When you have the word just diabetes being used, you should understand that they are talking about this diabetes only. This is the more common one. ठीक है, पर अगर specify कर दिया diabetes insipidus, then you should know what it means. Okay, and I'm sure you are aware the people with diabetes, they are asked not to consume more sugar because their body cannot actually process and store it because of lack of insulin. Okay, this is the end of our endocrine system. Let's take one question. If you have any questions in this section, you can ask. But ask in the doubt section, okay? Don't ask it here. I will not be able to directly address your query here. Even if you are writing in bold, I see some people, they're putting their queries in bold letters. कि हमारी थोड़ी urgent है, please look into it. That's not how it works, right? We have a system in place. Let's try to use it that way. I'm happy to address your queries, but yeah, once they come through the channel. Also, the second thing which I've been observing is that, of course, all of you are coming from different backgrounds, but there are people who might have a little bit more idea about biology because they have studied the subject, it's been their subject. So they might be using certain terms here once we are, dealing with the response portal, which you are not familiar with, right? So sometimes it becomes intimidating, but you have to understand this is going to be there in all subjects. Somebody is going to have a greater edge in economics. Somebody is going to have a greater edge in polity. Somebody might be better in the history stuff, already knowing things because it was their subject. This is something which they graduated in or maybe post graduation in, right? But don't feel troubled by that. Okay, you have to understand that the exam requires you to have certain general idea, but the syllabus has clearly mentioned this is the idea of a generalist which they are expecting from, right? So when you hear terms like gluconeogenesis or glyconeogenesis or glycogenesis or anything like that, right? Make sure you are not worried about that. Make sure you are not troubled कि यार मुझे क्यों नहीं पता ये क्या है. And don't go about starting to Google all of that. It's not needed. It's a very good thing if somebody knows it because probably they've read it, they remember it or whatever it is. But your objective should be at least to know what we do in the class. ठीक है, उतना minimum रखना है. And you also need to have that confidence that yes, I will be good. If I do this well, if I solve questions, if I do my current affairs properly, I will be in a good position, right? And that is it. You don't have to know everything about everything, right? That is an important point. And at the same time, you also should hold your ground well and not get confused when more facts comes, right? They have an edge on one subject, you might be having an edge in another subject. Okay, let's look at the question. Pituitary gland, by virtue of its trophic hormone, controls the secretory activity of other endocrine glands. So what does this term mean? Trophic hormone. It means the property where one endocrine gland stimulates another endocrine gland, or the working of another endocrine gland is based on one particular endocrine gland. Now we are talking about pituitary and the fact that it has trophic hormones which can affect the other glands. Now let's see what it is asking. Which one of the following endocrine glands can function independent of the pituitary gland? Let's see our option. Thyroid. Thyroid के लिए we have TSH. TSH means that TSH is first going to be released, then the thyroid will produce it. Okay. Then gonads. Gonads के लिए we had LH. Okay. Gonads का job क्या है? Production of sex hormones. What are those sex hormones? You have estrogen, progesterone, and in males you have testosterone. The production of these hormones, they are dependent on LH production in the body. Luteinizing hormone being produced in the body, that is going to stimulate the release of these sex hormones from the gonads. Adrenal gland के लिए we have ACTH. Okay, ACTH, which is going to then stimulate the adrenal to do its job. Okay, and parathyroid. Parathyroid is independent. Parathyroid के लिए we do not need a particular secretion from the pituitary glands. So the answer is D, as a lot of you have told me, right? We have Abhinav, Nandini, Madhubala, Muskan who have given the answer D. It's absolutely correct. You have just now written all of this, right? There's nothing special which I have told you here, right? Okay, let's take a few questions which we have. What is the difference between adrenaline and noradrenaline? Okay, see, understanding the function of adrenaline and noradrenaline is slightly complicated. I'll try and put it most simple in a most simple way. First of all, chemically they are different structures, they are different hormones. Their working, I said, is together. Okay, we use the word synergy. That they work in synergy. Now, what does this mean? This means that adrenaline is going to be like something, a hormone which is going to be increasing your vitals, right? Increasing your heart rate, opening your pupils, okay? Or maybe you get goosebumps, all of that, that is adrenaline is doing. Just as adrenaline is doing all those functions, you have noradrenaline which is coming in and trying to balance it. So that bringing the hormone back to normalcy at normal levels. In an excited form, it's making changes for the body at a higher level. Now to bring that down, to bring that back to down, not in the other direction, but at the normal level. That is the job of noradrenaline. Okay. I hope it makes sense. Okay, Saad has asked, what is the difference between diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus? So, diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus are entirely different diseases because of the different hormones which are involved. Diabetes insipidus is because of deficiency of ADH. ADH का काम है किडनी से reabsorption कराना water का, right? So when that hormone is less, the effect is going to be on the kidneys and the water supply in the body. Diabetes mellitus is for the deficiency of insulin, and the job of insulin is to reduce blood glucose level. So the impact is going to be in the amount of glucose in the body. Entirely different diseases. Okay, the hormone is different, so everything is different. Right? All right. I'm not getting. Now I don't understand this statement as to what you are not getting. So a specific reply at a specific place is probably what we would need. Also, if you are talking about not getting adrenaline and noradrenaline ka function, so that you don't need to get. Okay, just because Ritu asked me that question, I explained it to her. Otherwise, I had no intentions of going into the functioning of adrenaline, noradrenaline. You don't need that. It's a very complicated topic. We are going to start with genetics now. Okay, different aspects of genetics, the working of your DNA and RNA, which we have mentioned earlier also. But here we will see how they actually work, what is their structure, what is their chemical nature. We'll start with the chemical nature of your genetic material. I hope you remember a few things about that. Can you tell me what do you remember about genetic material? We've used that term. So tell me something about it. DNA and RNA is the genetic material. All living organisms have DNA as their main genetic material except certain viruses. Which have RNA as its genetic material, main genetic material. Okay, DNA and RNA, yes, this is correct, but what was it? Right, you're telling me it was DNA and RNA. I know that, but what was the meaning of being a genetic material? What was it doing? Okay, chromosomes. DNA makes up the chromosome, right? What else? What is it supposed to do in the body? Chromosomes existing in the DNA present in the nucleus. ये तो ठीक है, करे करते क्या है ये important question है यहाँ पे बस. We spoke about ideas of hereditary, ideas of inheritance, and how your genetic material contains the information for everything you do in life. Transfer of genes, yes. Transfer of characters, inheritance, right. Okay. ग्रेगोर मेंडल जेनेटिक्स. अच्छा, तो आगे नहीं चले जाना, मेंडल तो अभी आएगा. Okay, stay here. Just talk about this genetic material. It's a good thing that you know about Mendel, but listen to the question I'm asking you. Right? I've asked you what is genetic material. I've asked you what is it supposed to do. We discussed this fact that characters are transferred from parents to offsprings. Okay, how those characters are transferred from parents to offsprings, like you have some features like your mother, some like your father. How does that happen? That happens with the help of DNA. That information is passed with the help of DNA, and with that information passing, it becomes the controlling characteristic in an organism. So for a particular person, everything will be determined by his genetic material. How his hair is going to be, how his liver is going to work, how he's going to walk, what kind of diseases he'll have, everything will be, that whole information will be in the genetic material. Okay, so we are going to now first study what is the structure of genetic material or the structure of DNA and RNA. Chemically, they are nucleic acids. They are nucleic acids, and being nucleic acids, they are made up of three components. One is a pentose sugar. Pentose sugar means a carbohydrate with 5 carbons. A carbohydrate with 5 carbons, that is a pentose sugar. Then there is a phosphate group, and we have a nitrogenous base. We have a nitrogenous base. Write down. Please write down. Nucleic acids form the genetic material. Nucleic acids form the genetic material of all living organisms they are responsible for transmission of characters from parents to their offsprings. They are made up of pentose sugar. You can copy this from the screen. They are made up of pentose sugar, phosphate group, and nitrogenous base. Nitrogenous bases further can be divided into two groups. Nitrogenous bases can be further divided into two groups, purines and pyrimidines. I hope you are writing this down. Under purines, we have adenine and guanine. And in pyrimidines, we have three: cytosine, thymine, and uracil. Cytosine, thymine, and uracil. Now, if we look at the structures of DNA and RNA, we can see certain points of differences there. The first point of difference is in the pentose sugar which they have. Okay, the first point of difference is in the pentose sugar. So DNA has deoxyribose sugar and RNA has ribose sugar. Both of these sugars, they have 5 carbon atoms. That's their common point. But they are different, and that's how they get their name also. So DNA is deoxyribose nucleic acid. RNA is ribose nucleic acid. Please write this down. Keep writing this. DNA has deoxyribose sugar, RNA has ribose sugar, and there is also a difference in the nitrogenous bases. So, from here, we will be considering these nitrogenous bases in abbreviated form only. These are standard references: A, G, C, T, and U. Okay, so when we talk about DNA, DNA has adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. RNA does not have thymine, but it has the other three: adenine, guanine, cytosine. But instead of thymine, it has uracil. Instead of thymine, it has uracil. So the thymine in DNA is replaced by thymine in DNA is replaced by uracil in RNA. Okay, so we are talking about genetic material, the basic genetic material. We say genetic material is something which will transfer characters from one generation to the other. That is the job. Okay, it holds the information which will determine everything in a person. If we go into it chemically, it is made up of these three things: sugar, phosphate, nitrogenous base. Nitrogenous base में further two types, purines and pyrimidines. और ये उनके नाम हैं आगे which you have to learn. Right? Now, how this fits into the structure of DNA and RNA, that's the next thing. We have a deoxyribose sugar in DNA, a ribose sugar in RNA. Then there is a difference in their nitrogenous bases. You have adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine in DNA. You have adenine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil in RNA. Okay. Now, there is one more point of difference which is mostly true. DNA is double-stranded. What does that mean? It means it will be in the form of two parallel ribbons, two strands, double-stranded, and RNA is single-stranded. That means in the form of a single ribbon-like structure. Now, this is not 100% rule. In nature, there are always exceptions. So, we have exceptions of this rule not being followed. Okay. So, you have single-stranded DNA in some examples and double-stranded RNA in some examples. Though very rare, but it can be possible. Okay, so 3 points of distinction which you have to remember for DNA and RNA. DNA, deoxyribose, RNA ribose, then thymine and uracil are different, and then DNA more often than not is double-stranded, whereas RNA is single-stranded. Also, if you want to add, most living organisms, they contain DNA as their main genetic material, with the exception of a few viruses which can also have RNA which holds their main genetic information, main hereditary information. Okay, Archie has asked, all the glands which we have studied are endocrine glands except pancreas. Archie, pancreas is also an endocrine gland. Okay, we do not consider pancreas to be a non-endocrine gland. The only thing is, additionally, along with being endocrine gland, it also means that it is exocrine also. So that's an additional thing. But we do not say that endocrine nahi hai. सारे जितने किए आज आपने, they are all endocrine glands including pancreas. Pancreas में additionally it has a exocrine function also. So we called it the mixed gland. ठीक है? Okay. Now we'll talk a little bit about the structure of DNA. Okay, we'll talk about the structure of DNA. What happens is, between these base pairs, we have said that DNA has two strands. Okay, one unit in the nucleic acid, the units which are formed, that means the units formed by joining of these three things, phosphate, pentose and nitrogenous base, when they come together, we use the term nucleotide. So nucleotide is all of this coming together, nitrogenous base, phosphate group and pentose sugar. Of course, these are not standard abbreviations. You have to write the full term, but you can write. Nucleotide is the combination of this. Now, there will not just be one nucleotide. There will be multiple units of this. Okay. So, many such pairs or many such groups, they join together to form the whole nucleotide, to form the whole of DNA. We can also say this, call this as polynucleotides. You can also call nucleic acids, or we can also call DNA as polynucleotides. Just some terms which you might come across, so I thought you should know what it means. Okay. Now, between these two strands, there's a need for a joining which has to happen so that these two strands don't go away. For that, there is a system called complementary base pairing. इसको अब ध्यान से समझना है, ये बहुत जगह यूज होता है. Very important. Complementary base pairing, what does this mean? Which of these bases join to which other bases, that is fixed. A purine is going to join to a pyrimidine, and which purine joins to which pyrimidine in nature, that is fixed. We have adenine, it joins to thymine. We have guanine, it joins with cytosine. The bonds formed here, they are also fixed. Double bond, in case of adenine and thymine, and triple bond in case of guanine and cytosine. Okay. That means wherever in nature, in any structure of DNA, if you have adenine on one side, on the other side, you will have thymine and only thymine, nothing else. If you have guanine on one side, you can have only and only cytosine on the other end. I'll show you the structure of DNA, then this will make more sense there. Okay. So this is the structure of DNA. What is happening here? You can see these two strands or these two ribbon-like structures, the blue colored ones. They are made up of sugar and phosphate. So we say this is the sugar phosphate backbone. Okay, we say this is the sugar and phosphate backbone, and in between them, they are joined by the nitrogenous bases by using complementary base pairing. What does that mean? Adenine joins to thymine guanine joins to cytosine. They can be in any order, they can be anywhere in the two strands, but their complementarity is fixed. Think of this also in a way that if I know, if this is suppose a strand and I know we have A, T, C, P. If I know what is present in one strand in one area, I can easily predict what would be there on the other side. Okay, A के साथ we know it there will only be T. With T it will be A. With C we will have G. With G, C we will have G again. All of these concepts are going to be used from here. So please make sure you are understanding. If there is any confusions, you can ask in your doubt section. So based on this complementarity, we have the base pairing which is happening, and this base pairing is actually helping the two strands to be joined by the bonds which they are forming. Okay. Now, after this is normally how the strands would be. Okay, you can think of long chain of polynucleotides which are forming the DNA structure. But along with this, it's not really a straight chain. What happens is it goes through a twist. You can see this twist, right? It has twisted on itself. The two parallel chains, they have twisted on itself, and this is how this structure now looks. We call this as the double helix DNA structure. We call this as the double helix DNA. Okay. Let's take this one more time. Talking about the structure of DNA, basic चीज तो ये था कि it is made up of these three things. Okay, pentose sugar, phosphate group, nitrogenous bases. That's what DNA is made up of. Which nitrogenous bases are there in DNA? Adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine. Okay, that's something which we know. The bases are going to be joined in a complementary base pairing. So adenine to thymine, guanine to cytosine. This is also fixed. How the structure of DNA actually looks? You have a backbone of sugar and phosphate. In between the complementary base pairs, they will join and they'll bring the two strands, keep the two strands together, and the whole of DNA that can be twisted on itself. Okay. See, now we know the components of DNA, so we are doing a lot of experimentation of DNA. We have even created DNA artificially in the lab by taking these three things. Okay. Let's write a line or two. In the structure of DNA, nucleotides pair up. In the structure of DNA, nucleotides pair up into strands, that twist together into a spiral structure called the double helix DNA. Called the double helix DNA. The base pairing the base pairing is complementary. The base pairing is complementary with adenine joining to thymine, adenine joining to thymine, and cytosine joining to guanine. Okay. Now we will see how this DNA actually functions and how this structure will ultimately determine your characteristics. Okay. So after the basic structure, we'll go into that part, but let's take a break and then we will go into this further. But to understand that, this should be clear. So make sure you are clear with this. Genetics should be new for a lot of people. So please make sure your concepts are clear and keep asking doubts as you feel any confusion. Okay. So going on further, now let's connect this idea of DNA to some of the things which we have already done, and we'll introduce one new concept of a gene. So you already know these things. We're just going to align them. So we spoke about the cell, right? We have studied what a cell is, what the cell does. In that cell, we mentioned that there is a nucleus. Inside every cell, there is a nucleus, and this nucleus, we said, is the one which contains the genetic material. So inside your cell, where genetic material is found, it is found inside the nucleus. And we also studied that this genetic material is organized in the form of rod-like or thread-like structures called chromosomes. If you want, you can write this, but you've already written this when you were studying the nucleus. So cell के अंदर nucleus, and nucleus contains your genetic material in the form of chromosomes. Okay, till here. Now this chromosomes, we are saying they are rod-like structures of DNA. So what makes up your chromosomes? It is the DNA. That becomes the next thing. And within this DNA also, the smaller parts of DNA is the gene. This is the new idea we are introducing here. DNA, and in that DNA, a smaller part of that DNA, that is what we are going to call the gene. Now let's elaborate on this concept. Please listen carefully. So DNA is a large number of nucleotides, polynucleotides, many such nitrogenous bases, the base pairing. That's what makes the long DNA strand. Okay. Now we said this is something which is responsible for inheritance of our characters. This is something which will determine all our characters, right? So now that whole long strand, long chain of DNA, that holds the information. In that, smaller specific parts hold information for one character at a time. So those small parts associated with one character, that is what a gene is going to be. Okay, let me exemplify. Now this is not a correct example in terms of technicality, right? But for the sake of understanding, This will suffice. I hope it makes sense to you. I'm trying to simplify it as far as possible. So this is a DNA segment which I have made, and we have studied that this is made up of nucleotide base pairs. So I'll write any random sequence. This sequence is different for everybody. Okay, the sequence which is there. So you have millions and billions of base pairs in your body. Your whole DNA, if we like just lay it out in this chain, so it will be in millions and billions and trillions of base pairs. Okay, and that pattern is unique for everybody. That's what makes us all distinct. Okay. Now I'm picking out any random pattern. So A, C, G, A, G, C. Okay, this is just one random pattern I've picked up. Now, what we can obviously see is that the other side with complementary base pairing, we know what's going to happen on the other side. So you have A, G, C, then you have A, C and G. ये आप खुद भी कर सकते हो, right? You know this simple concept. Now, out of this DNA, we can have this first part, this much segment representing the eye color. Okay, we can have this much part representing the color of the eyes. Okay, then we can have this, say, next part which holds the information for the color of your hair. Okay. Now, because there are so many characters, so there would be a number of genes. Genes is nothing but a smaller part, a smaller segment of DNA, which is going to be responsible for giving us specific characters. Okay, so you already have the information of the other things. You can just add this one concept of gene being the segment of DNA. We'll see further how this works, but at least till here it should be clear. कि cell है, cell में nucleus है, nucleus has chromosome, chromosomes are made up of DNA, and segments of DNA is what we are going to be calling the gene. अच्छा, क्या कुछ गड़बड़ कर दिया मैंने? एक मिनट. अच्छा, यहाँ पे. ओके, चलो. थैंक यू. ठीक है. अच्छा, ये भी क्यों लिखा मैंने? ठीक है, फाइन. Right? Okay. Now we are going to see how these genes are actually going to show their effect. Okay, we are going to talk about a concept in which we will see how this gene will express itself. The concept is gene expression. Expression of genes. Now, these genes or these parts of DNA, we are saying that they are holding the information for determining different characteristics in an organism. How this characteristic will finally be expressed would be in the form of proteins. The expression of the information which the DNA holds is going to be in the form of specialized proteins which are produced for each and every characteristics. Now those proteins directly could become pigments for something, or those proteins could act as enzymes and lead to formation of different processes. That's a different thing, what proteins eventually do. But the basic line which you need to know is कि जो information gene में है, how it will reflect. Like you have the information here, we've mentioned information for eye color. How it will reflect itself finally would be in the form of putting up specific proteins based on the information which is present here. ठीक है, ये कोई स्टैंडर्ड पैटर्न नहीं है. आई कलर की रिप्रेजेंटेड TCG से नहीं होती. इट्स मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स देन दैट, right? There is no standardization of 3 in a gene or 4 in a gene like that also. Okay, so this is only for understanding. ठीक है, इसको रियल नहीं समझ लेना कि a hair color will be represented by A, G and C. Okay, it's not like that. Right? Now, how does this gene expression work? That's our next point. The DNA which is there, this is the cell. Okay, this is the cell. And in the cell, you have this nucleus. You have the cell, you have the nucleus. In the nucleus, we have the DNA, right? DNA in the form of chromosomes, that's found in the nucleus. So the information or the genes are in the nucleus. Now we said for this information to be expressed, we need to produce proteins. Protein production takes place in the ribosomes. I hope you remember this. Ribosomes which are found in the cytoplasm. तो ये न्यूक्लियस में है DNA. Protein production will be in the cytoplasm. Now that means the information from the DNA has to reach the ribosomes. Only then they will know which protein to produce. For every gene, a different kind of protein would be produced. Okay? So, for this, we have a system in which this DNA produces an mRNA. mRNA is messenger RNA. So DNA will not as such come out of the nucleus to tell the ribosomes कि अच्छा ये protein बनाओ. They have a messenger and that messenger is RNA. So this mRNA, this takes the information of that particular gene segment and it brings it to the ribosomes. With this information, ribosomes know what protein they are supposed to produce. And they produce that specific protein for which the information was there and that character is expressed. Okay. We'll write this in the 2 steps which are mentioned here. DNA to RNA transcription and RNA to protein translation. So you have DNA, and in DNA also we are talking about a DNA segment or gene which is going to be changed into mRNA or messenger RNA. This process is called transcription. And where is transcription taking place? It is taking place in the nucleus. So transcription of DNA to messenger RNA takes place in the nucleus. Once this messenger RNA is produced, it goes out and this messenger RNA takes the information for production of the specific proteins, and this process is called translation. And translation is happening in the ribosomes present in the cytoplasm. So which protein is produced, which protein is not produced, that will ultimately determine your characters. Okay. Let's write a few things down here. Okay. Segments of DNA, segments of DNA tell the individual cells, segments of DNA tell the individual cells how to produce, specific proteins, how to produce specific proteins these segments are called genes. These segments are called genes. It is the presence or absence of specific proteins it is the presence or absence of specific proteins that give an organism its characteristics. That give an organism its characteristic. Gene expression happens in two steps. Gene expression happens in two steps. Transcription of DNA segment to messenger RNA takes place in the cell nucleus. And translation of messenger RNA to specific proteins takes place in the ribosomes. Takes place in the ribosomes. Now, based on this idea, we are going to talk about some vaccines. Okay, based on this idea, we are going to talk about some vaccines. There is no rule. If you are asking about this sequence, तो इसमें purine और pyrimidine का कोई as such rule नहीं है. Anything can come anywhere. 2 purines, 5 purines, 5 pyrimidines. There is no as such restriction to that. Okay. This concept of gene expression is what we can use for making vaccines. Under the nucleic acid vaccine, there are various types. We are going to do 2 types today and 2 in the next class when we talk about some more technological aspects. Vaccine ke bare mein, or the basic idea of how a vaccine works, what do you remember about that? So tell me that. How does a vaccine work? What are we giving in the vaccine? Okay, and what do we want to achieve, right? Can you think of and let me know that while I connect this to the vaccines? We are going to talk about DNA and RNA vaccines. Okay, DNA and RNA vaccines. इसमें और भी टाइप है, plasmid, vector, recombinant vaccines, that we'll do next time. But here we'll talk about pure DNA and RNA vaccines. Okay, Nitin says it is antigen and antibody, right? Okay, antigen antibody reaction basically is going to be happening. What is the basic premise which we needed was, we said that give an antigen to the person in the form of vaccine. Okay, immunological memory, Ajit, very good. That was the word I was looking for. Okay, so give the vaccine, give the antigen in the form of a vaccine. This antigen goes into the body, B cells get stimulated, immune memory is created, and along with production of antibodies, which is not exactly significant in the process, basic thing जो हमें चाहिए is some way in which we can have this immune memory. Okay, this is our basic idea. Now we had discussed that there are various forms in which we can give this antigen. Okay, can you also mention which are the forms in which we discussed giving antigens? How were we giving antigens, or what were the types of vaccines which we have already talked about? Vaccines provide active immunity, production of antibodies by dead or weakened antigens. Okay, these are 2 forms which we have already done, dead and weakened antigens. Okay, good point. Help in production of artificial immune response. We give antigen, live attenuated. Okay, Pinky, yes, correct. One was giving the live organism, then we gave the dead organism. Then we also did instances where we said yes, very correct. We have to give the antigen in a form that it will not cause the disease. That's our basic premise. Okay, so that's why we chose a live weakened organism or a dead organism. We also spoke about vaccines where we could just use the protein. Okay, we will just use the protein and that protein will act as the antigen, right? The subunit vaccine which Archie has mentioned, right? तो उसी कॉन्सेप्ट को लेकर हमने अब यूज कर लेना है जीन एक्सप्रेशन का आइडिया. Suppose for a particular pathogen, we have a protein which can act as an antigen. There is a protein which is an antigen, and if we give that protein, we will be able to achieve our goal of creating the immune memory. तो जो ये antigen है वो protein है. Now one way is to give the whole of organism. Whole organism will go, protein will also go. Second way is just cut out that protein and give that. We found out a new way in which what we are going to use is, we are going to use nature's own system of protein production. What is nature's system of protein production? DNA, mRNA, protein. This is the sequence which body follows, which happens in nature. So we'll use the same thing. Protein देने की जगह we can give DNA, a small segment of DNA responsible for production of this protein. Okay, this DNA will then form mRNA, and this mRNA will produce the proteins. So two more steps we want to do for production of this protein, which is the antigen. Once this protein is produced, your B cells do not care if it was produced inside your body or if it came from outside. Once B cells recognize this antigen, they will start doing this job. For them, it is the same process. If the same antigen has come, they will be stimulated, they will produce antibodies, they will create immune memory. And that's ultimately our goal. So instead of giving the protein, what we can do is we can either give the mRNA segment. आपने वो piece ले लिया mRNA का, which is responsible for production of this particular antigen. Or one more step, you can take a DNA piece for production of this segment. तो DNA से पहले mRNA बनेगा, mRNA से protein बनेगा. Protein will act as an antigen, B cells will be stimulated, we will have immune memory being created. Okay. Let's write this down. Write down first mRNA. mRNA vaccines work by introducing a messenger RNA sequence, which is coded for a disease specific antigen, which is coded for a disease specific antigen. Now write down DNA vaccine. DNA vaccine introduction of a DNA sequence encoding the antigen against which we seek immune response. And you can write some examples also here from COVID. So mRNA vaccines sorry. Pfizer, Moderna, these are mRNA vaccines. DNA में we have Zydus Cadila, COVID vaccine. Okay. I hope you've understood this. Vaccine, we'll talk a little bit more about recombinant vaccines and the concept of viral vectors and plasmids next time, but I hope you have understood this. Nothing complicated here, just using the simple concept which is already taking place in nature. DNA se mRNA, mRNA se protein, and if this protein is the one which is going to be antigenic, then this will be identified by the B cell, they'll produce antibody and the immune memory. Okay. Now, let's go further into some basic ideas of reproduction and some concepts of inheritance. So, when normally reproduction is taking place, we are talking about chromosome number here. Chromosome number for a particular species is fixed. How many chromosomes would be there in an organism? That is definitely fixed. For human beings, this number is 46. We have 46 number of chromosomes. An elephant will have a different number, the horse will have a different number, the sunflower will have a different number, honeybee will have a different number. Okay, number of chromosomes is different. Now, let's consider the system of reproduction. So, how reproduction takes place is, there is an egg which comes from the mother. So, mother has 46 chromosomes. All the cells of your body, they have 46 chromosomes. Okay, mother has 46 chromosomes. Father also has 46 chromosomes. The mother gives an egg during reproduction. Father gives a sperm. At the time of reproduction, the egg and the sperm, they meet, they join together, and a new cell called zygote is formed. So, zygote is the first cell of your life. Life of an organism starts with the single cell, which is the zygote. Okay. Now, think of this statement which we put in, every organism should have 46 chromosomes. Okay, so mother has 46, all the cells of father also has 46. If these two cells fuse, if we suppose they have 46 chromosomes and both of them fuse, then the zygote will actually end up having 2 into 46. Double ho gaya number, because both of them are giving their 46 chromosomes. That means as subsequent generations keep happening, the chromosome number will never be 46. It will keep changing. right? That should not be happening. So nature has very smartly devised a specific system in which these sex cells, or the word which is there is gametes, they do not have the same number of chromosomes as the other cells. The number of chromosomes here, that is halved. So it is 23 in the egg, 23 in the sperm, so that when the zygote is formed, the number 46 is maintained. In order to maintain the chromosome numbers, the sex cells or gametes uniquely, they are the only cells in the body which do not have 46 chromosomes. The only cells in the body which have 23 chromosomes. All other cells have the complete set of 46 chromosomes. This property is to make sure that the chromosome number is maintained. Okay. And we are getting 23 from one parent, 23 from the other parent. So basically we have two sets of 23 chromosomes. It is going to be represented as 2 into 23, or in general 2 into n. N can be variable for different species. Okay, n is something which will be variable, which will be different for different species. Okay, here for human beings it is 23. The concept or the technical term which we are going to be using here is haploid and diploid. Diploid is the 2m, that is the 46 chromosomes for human beings. That means all cells other than the sex cell. And we have a name for that. That is the somatic cell. Somatic cells are all cells other than the sex cells. And they would be called diploid because they are 2n, 2 into 23. Think of that. The n is for the gametes. Gametes or sex cells, we say that they have a single pair or single group of chromosomes. Here you can see one is blue, one is red. The two colors, they have been shown as a distinction to the two parents. One set coming from one parent, one coming from the other parent. So in this organism, in every organism, so that means half and half is coming from both the parents. 23 from mother, 23 from father. Equally, both of them are giving their DNA. So in your body, you have DNA equally coming from both the parents. Okay. We'll write both these terms up. Write down diploid. Diploid. Two sets of chromosomes. Two sets of chromosomes. One coming from each parent. Two sets of chromosome, one coming from each other. One coming from each parent, sorry. They are found in the somatic cells. Somatic cells. That is any cell other than the sex cells. Any cell other than the sex cell. Then haploid cell, single set of unpaired chromosomes, single set of unpaired chromosomes they are found in sex cell or gametes. They are found in sex cells or gametes. Now, further we'll talk and we'll connect this to inheritance. How is this 23 and 23 actually going to be working, or what are the characters which they have? The concept which we are bringing in here is called homologous pair of chromosomes. Now please listen to this clearly. This is very important for the rest of it. We said that 23 chromosomes are coming from one parent, 23 from the other. Now which 23, which characters, how it's represented, that's the point which you need clarity on now. So let's write down for one parent, say for the mother. Mother will give you 23 of her chromosomes. Now, how we identify chromosomes is, or for the purpose of studying, we name them as 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, standard chromosomes have been identified, their structures have been studied, and we are going to say that we are going to call them 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. So I'll write it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like this till 23 we can go. Okay. Suppose this chromosome number 2 contains a gene for eye color. Of course, a chromosome has a lot of DNA, so it will have many genes, hundreds of genes it can have. This is just one gene I have mentioned, that this chromosome number 2 contains the gene for eye color. Chromosome number 4, for instance, this contains the gene for hair color. Okay, this has a gene out of the many other genes which this chromosome has. It has a gene for hair color, right? Now let's see what the father is bringing. The father also gives you 23 chromosomes. These 23 would be the same chromosomes. What do I mean by the same chromosomes? That means chromosome number 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 and so on. When I say same, that means chromosome number 2 will be similar in structure. It will also have the eye color gene. Chromosome number 4 will also be similar in structure and will hold the gene for hair color. Okay. Now what character they are actually giving, that can be different. But the basic component of what gene it is, that is the same. What do I mean by this? Right? Suppose eye color. मदर ने आपको दिया है आई कलर के लिए ब्राउन जीन. There is a gene on chromosome number 2. Again, please remember, ये hypothetical examples हैं. So that gene which is coming from the mother, she is giving you the gene for brown eyes. Your father is also giving you an eye color gene, but his is with blue eyes. Right? Both the genes are same, basically the same, because they are both discussing, they are both representing eye color. But उसके अंदर character different हो सकता है. For hair color, mother can give you black colored, father can give you brown colored gene. Right? Ultimately, how it will be reflected in you, that we will study now. That's the next thing which we have to study कि finally आपका eye color कौन सा होगा. ऐसा तो नहीं होगा एक brown हो गया एक blue हो गया. That is not normal. You will have one eye color. Which eye color will it be? That we'll see how that is determined. But here you just have to remember that 23 set में 23 chromosomes cover all the characters, and all the characters in your body equally come from both the parents. Okay, so you have all the characters in pair. अगर आपकी body में eye color का gene है, you will have two genes. That is why we are using the concept of 2n, because everything is in pairs. Homologous pairs of chromosomes. Similar shape, similar size, similar genes. Okay, similar but characteristic can be different. Right? Which will ultimately reflect that we will study how inheritance takes place. But यहाँ पे the point you have to remember, the point you have to take away, everything, every character, every gene in your body that is expressed in pair. Okay, please write this down. Homologous pair of chromosomes. Homologous pair of chromosomes. They are similar in length. They are similar in length, structure, and gene position. Similar in length, structure, and gene position. One coming from each parent. One coming from each parent. Okay, now we are going to see how this inheritance is actually being affected. And we'll do that through the experiments of Mendel. So in the beginning of the class, somebody had remembered Mendel. Now it's time for Mendel to show his work. There's a person called Gregor Mendel. He had no understanding of DNA or gene or what those things are. But nevertheless, he gave us an understanding of how inheritance can take place. He studied the garden pea, your normal matar ka plant. He studied that, and through that study, he was able to decide that out of these two, like two eye color genes, two hair color genes, which will ultimately express and how inheritance is going to take place. His work is commendable, even if we have found out that things are not as simplistic as Mendel brought up, but mathematically his calculations can still give us a lot of idea. He was very lucky that he worked with garden pea, because maybe if he would have worked with any other plant or any other organisms, he wouldn't have got the results which he had, right? Of course, this experiment and its details are not necessary for you to know, but this is going to help in the understanding, right? And then we are going to apply this on human beings also. So please pay attention. Let's try and understand what happened. Mendel studied different characteristics of the garden pea, like height, color of flower. And for each of these characters, Mendel found out that there are two contrasting traits. Okay? If he started looking at the height of the plants of garden pea, he found that there is one plant which is tall, there is another one which is dwarf. He did not find intermediate varieties. He found two extreme contrasting traits. This really helped in his experiment. Okay. So if he studied the color of the flower, he found out that the flower was either violet or white. He started breeding these flowers over subsequent generations and seeing what is the result which is going to be produced. I'll show you one picture to show one such trait which he studied. He studied 7 traits in total. This is on color of the pod. Color of the pod. So pod is the outer covering. Matar ka chilka jo hai, that's called the pod. So Mendel brought 2 varieties, pure varieties. One was green, one was yellow. Okay, he brought 2 of these plants just to see ki next generation mein what they are going to produce. So on reproduction, in the next generation, what he found was all of these plants, they were all green. He brought one green plant, he brought another plant which was yellow, and he found out that all their children, all the plants which came from them, they are all green. Mendel was surprised. Ki yellow kahan gaya? Then what he did was he took 2 of these green plants produced in this generation, and then again did the reproduction, fertilization process, new plants formed. In this, he now found that there were some yellow plants also. Okay, in this generation, he saw both green and yellow. So Mendel thought to himself, ki yellow was there, it cannot just jump one generation and go to the next one. Okay, from grandparent direct grandchild mein nahi ja sakta. So he concluded that in this generation, okay, in the second generation also, whatever is causing yellow color, that is present. It's not expressing itself, but it is definitely present. Okay. Now we will also mathematically try and reduce this, try and see how this is going to happen. Okay. You're supposed to draw this with me as I am drawing, and you're also going to learn how to make this. It is very important because this is going to help you solve many different kinds of questions. Okay, we'll take the example of this tall and dwarf plant. Okay, we'll take the example of height. So tall plant ko we are calling capital T and capital T. I hope you remember homologous pair of chromosomes. Every character, every gene is present in an organism in pairs. ठीक है 2n का concept diploid, that's what we have, that's why we written 2 T's. The dwarf plant we will call small t and small t. Capital T for tall and small t for dwarf. Okay. Now, if you remember, we studied that for reproduction, we are going to have half the number of chromosomes. The sex cells or gametes were haploid. So, यहाँ पे भी we will have to break our pairing if we have to see the reproductive process. So, we can break this pairing. Now, he checked for different probabilities. What are all the different possible options which can take place? So, in that, we are going to check every option with every other option. Simple probability logic. So, T with this T, capital T, small t. Then the second T with this T, capital T, small t. Then capital T, small t again, and capital T, small t. All of these are same, right? And they are all going to be tall. Just like all of them in the earlier picture which we saw, all were green. So like that, all of these would be tall. Okay. But this is not solving anything. We have to do this experiment again. Now take two of these and the term we use is making a cross. Let's make a cross between these two. So capital T, small t, capital T, small t, a cross between them. First, gamete formation or separation of characters, haploid setup, no pairing. Now checking for combination. ये आपको सीखना है. How this is supposed to be done, you should know this. So capital T, then capital T, small t, capital T, small t again, and small t and small t. Now from this side, you know, capital T is tall. Capital T, small t is also, sorry, capital T is tall. Capital T, small t is also tall. And small t is dwarf. So what we have is, we have one dwarf and these three are tall. Okay. So with this, Mendel came to a conclusion that out of these two contrasting characters, one is dominant and the other is recessive. The dominant character will express itself even when the recessive one is present. So capital T here overrides the effect of small t. Small t यहाँ पे present है. Small t is the gene for dwarfness. Okay, that is present, but it does not express itself. ऐसा नहीं है कि कुछ ये, this is not a medium height plant. This is a tall plant. The dwarfness gene is present, but it is recessive. That means it is not able to express itself. It will express itself only when both are the genes for dwarfness. Mendel didn't know genes, so he used the word factors. But that's what we are, now we understand that these are the genes. So there is a dominant trait, like for this, tall is dominant over dwarf. नेचर में, ओके, इफ यू आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन कि हाउ डू वी नो व्हाट इज डोमिनेंट व्हाट इज रिसेसिव, नेचर में what is dominant what is recessive is fixed. For the garden pea plant, tallness will always dominate over dwarfness. This is fixed. For another plant it can be something else also, lekin garden pea plant, the experiments which Mendel did for that particular plant, this is fixed. And how do we know which is dominant? आपने एक tall plant लिया, एक dwarf लिया, you found out all plants were tall, so we know tall is dominant. If all of these were dwarf, we could say dwarfness is dominating over tallness, but that's not the case, right? Okay, let's write a few terms. Start with all the characters in an organism, all the characters in an organism are manifested in two factors. All the characters in an organism are manifested in two factors. Two factors क्या हमने लिखे हैं? T and T. We are talking about the character. Character क्या है? Height. Height में we are talking about two contrasting traits, tallness and dwarfness. Both of them will be represented in a group of two letters. Why? Because we did the concept of 23 and 23 set of chromosomes. ये पीछे वाला भूलना नहीं है. Total 46. So N and then 2N. In every organism you have two sets of chromosomes. So two sets of all the genes. Okay. Both the parents are giving their traits. So, right, now I am explaining again. Please listen. Right. Sometimes I explain again also, you don't listen and then keep asking. I am explaining T, small t, दो क्यों है? Again, please pay attention. We said that every organism has 46 chromosomes. I am taking the example of human beings and explaining it to you. We said every organism has 46 chromosomes. 23 come from mother, 23 come from father. And that means आपकी body में pair बन गया. Both the parents gave you 23, you have now twice the number of that. And they are giving you all the same genes. That's what we studied when we studied homologous pair of chromosomes. That's why I said, please listen to the concept clearly, because everything you know, each step is going to be further connected in the next step. तो क्योंकि सब कुछ pair में है, so when we are representing an organism, we are showing, इसमें हम ये है कि सारे chromosomes we are not showing, we are just showing for one particular gene. But that one gene is also going to be in pairs because it is coming from both the parents. Now take this example. This is basically, the idea is that of parents only. Coming from one parent to, ये एक parent हो गया, ये एक parent हो गया. In this individual, if you see, capital T is coming from this parent, small t is coming from the other parent. Ultimately, every organism will have it in two pairs, in a pair, okay, two genes. Okay, write this down further. All characters are manifested by two factors. These factors or genes, these factors or genes are units of inheritance. These factors or genes are units of inheritance The dominant trait is the one which overrides the effect of the other trait For instance, tallness in garden P is dominant over dwarfness. And then recessive trait that trait which cannot express itself in the presence of the dominant trait. Dwarfness is recessive to tallness. Dwarfness is recessive to tallness. I hope you have drawn this. Going further into this, we are going to use some terms. The first one is homozygous and heterozygous. Homozygous and heterozygous. What does this mean? When both the genes are the same, like if we say capital T, small t, both the genes are same, that we will call homozygous. And heterozygous will be when both are different, capital T and small t. Write down homozygous. When both the genes are same, and heterozygous when both the genes are different. Write these examples also. Capital T, small t, and capital T and small t. Then next term is phenotypic. Phenotypic means what is the observable characteristic. आप लिखिए please. Phenotypic, the observable characteristic of an organism. For example, height or color. right? Like, for example, in this particular, all of these three, what is their phenotype? Their phenotype is that they are tall. That's how they look. That's what is their appearance. That is what their characteristic is. The second term is genotype. Phenotype and genotype. Genotype will be the genetic composition. Okay, write this down. Genotype is the genetic makeup. Genotype is the genetic makeup of an organism. Genetic makeup of an organism. For example, again look at this. Genotype of this is, it is homozygous tall. The second one, this is heterozygous, both the genes are different, but it is tall. तो phenotype में तो दोनों same है, both of them are tall, but their genotype is different. One is homozygous, other is heterozygous. If I ask you to give me the ratio in terms of phenotype and genotype in this case, how are you going to do that? अब पहले phenotype की बात करते हैं. Phenotype में we have 3 tall, 1 dwarf. So the ratio is going to be 3:1. 3 tall, 1 dwarf. So the ratio is 3:1. This is according to appearance. This is according to their observable characteristic. And genotype? Genotype may we have, if we have to see the ratio, we'll take first one, tall, homozygous. So 1. Then 2 heterozygous, capital T, small t, 2 of these. And the last one is homozygous for the recessive trait. So this is 1:2:1. Phenotypic and genotypic ratio in this particular case. 1:2:1. Okay, so these are the basic ideas which we had to take from Mendel, and we are now going to apply this to one of the characters of human beings. Now see, not everywhere can this be applied directly. Okay, because in a lot of places what will happen is that you will need more than one gene which will be involved, and ultimately their combination would be responsible for a particular character. Okay. But there are some places where we can apply this exactly. Okay, let me first take a question. Sonam has asked, capital T and T and small t is coming from 2 different individuals. So, okay. If so, then why not T and T instead of T and T? My question is that any individual have 2 chromosomes of tallness. It's very difficult to make sense of a question because I know you are pointing somewhere to this when you are writing, but I can't really figure out where you are. Let me read once more. Okay, if you are trying to make a distinction between the possibility of when an individual is tall, why is it capital T and not capital T and small t? Or why is it capital T and small t and not capital T and capital T here? I'm getting the sense that this is something like this you want to ask. Let me just exemplify this further. When we are first starting the experiment, or when Mendel was first starting the experiment, he did a lot of self-pollination because he wanted to make sure that in one variety the breeding is pure. There is no other mixing of character in that particular group, in that particular plant which he will take. So he took the pure variety. Now we have the possibility of actually checking the genes, chromosomes and picking out what we want to pick out. This is on an experimental basis क्योंकि आप देखना चाहते हो कि result क्या हो सकता है, right? This is tall, this one is also tall, right? But this is just for the purpose of our study. This is just for understanding कि अगर ये है, if it is two of them, then what happens? If it is the heterozygous form, then what happens? Okay, they might be tall when we look at them, but the genes which they have, they are different and they will ultimately give different results. Because this was capital T and small t, we had a dwarf plant which was available here. If this was capital T and capital T, tall plant, no, the homozygous kind, then we would have never had the dwarf plant because it is a recessive trait. Okay, so just to study this on an experimental basis, this is how we had picked out. Nature में किसी भी तरह से हो सकता है. This can happen, any other combination can also happen. Small t and small t can also unite. Okay, I hope I have hit the sense of what you were trying to ask. If there's something, please ask again. Right? Phenotype, genotype, जो दो words हैं, and the ratio. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about it again. Phenotype means observational. How something looks to us. What is the color of the flower? What is the color of the seed? What is the color of the whatever character we can identify, whatever we can check. Okay, whatever we know for sure. That would be phenotype. What is the genes behind that? Okay, what is the genetic system behind that? What is the combination behind that? That is genotype. So in this case, if we are just looking at the plants and we are writing what is their ratio, we have 3 plants which are look like tall to us, one which is dwarf. तो हमने बोल दिया 3:1. If you look into the genes, in the gene part, what do we have? We have 1:2:1. 1 जिसमें capital T है. Genotype में we will distinguish capital T from capital T small t because we are talking about how the genetic makeup is. तो ये homozygous है, ये heterozygous. Okay, so this is one. These two, the heterozygous forms, they might appear tall, but still genetically they are very different. They have 2 types of genes in them. So 2 for them, and then dwarfness for the last one, which is recessive for the recessive characters in homozygous form. Okay. Let's apply this to one aspect of human beings. Then we will conclude our class. This is going to be very interesting. You can check this, you can identify this, you can solve your own inheritance, knowing the blood groups and everything of your parents. First thing is, yes, you should know. That's the important point. But once you know it, this is going to be very helpful. In blood groups, it is only the ABO type which we can interpret by Mendelian genetics. We cannot identify the RH. Okay, we cannot identify the RH or cannot find out the RH inheritance in this pattern. That system is complicated, more than one gene is involved. So only ABO pattern exactly is reflected with the help of Mendel's genetics. So ABO में क्या था? ABO and AB, 4 blood groups. ये हो गया इनका phenotype. This is the observable characteristic. This is something which we can test and which we can find out. Now, what is the genetic system behind it? What is the genotype behind each of these? So, just like we said capital T and capital T for tallness, for blood group A, we will say capital A and capital A, the two genes. B के लिए similarly we will say capital B, capital B. O के लिए we will say O and O. Okay. Now, if we talk about dominant recessive relationship between A and O, A dominates. So, when AO is the combination observed in an individual, the blood group is going to be A only. Just like capital T and small t, that was a tall plant. So, when A and O are there, we will have blood group A. No impact of O. O is recessive to A. O is also recessive to B. तो अगर BO भी है किसी में, so BO will also in practice only be B blood group because B is dominating over O. Okay. A dominates over O, B dominates over O, O is recessive. So recessive में no other form is possible. Like small t, the only way they could express themselves was when they were in homozygous form. ठीक है, तो इसमें भी ये recessive है, no other possibility is there. There is one exception to Mendel's genetics, which is the AB blood group. In this, when A and B, they come together, they do not have a dominant recessive relationship amongst themselves. Okay, with themselves, A and B, they do not have a dominant recessive relationship. They are what we called co-dominant. Okay, what do we mean by co-dominant is that both genes express themselves. I hope you are noting all this down. Both genes express themselves. That means A and B, they do not have a dominant recessive relationship, but when they come in an individual, they will be able to create a new blood group type. They will both express themselves and a new blood group AB, would thus be formed. Inheritance pattern is similar to what we did for garden P. The same kind of crosses you will form. I'll give you one question so that you can practice the cross. Then we will discuss that. Okay, let's look at the question. Solve this question by in the same way in which you made the crosses of garden P. Same idea will be reflected here. Please make a cross. Don't try to solve it orally. It's very important that you learn how to do that. Okay, the answers which I am getting are O positive and A mostly. Okay, it's good if you've come to this answer. Let's read the question. A married couple adopted a male child. A few years later, twin boys were born to them. Okay, so now they have 3 children, twin boys and a male child. So 3 male children they have. Now, the blood groups of the couple is AB positive and O negative. Okay, so let's write this down first. तो हमें ब्लड ग्रुप उन्होंने बता दिया पेरेंट्स का AB and O. पॉजिटिव नेगेटिव भी दिया है, बट दैट वी कैन नॉट सॉल्व दिस वे, सो वी आर गोइंग टू लीव दैट फॉर नाउ. लेट्स consider this. A, B and O, these are the 2 parents. Now we have to see what are the possibility of their children. For that, first, to make the cross separation of gametes, right? And now checking for different probabilities. So we have AO, A and O again, BO, and B and O again. So if we look at these are the genotypes. अब इसको, if we see this in terms of blood group, this will be blood group A, BO will be blood group B. That means whenever these 2 people have children, they can either have blood group A or blood group O. Sorry, they can have either blood group A or blood group B. No other possibility is there. O negative. O negative तो यार ऑप्शन में ही नहीं है. अब ऐसे So let's read the question further. The blood groups of the 3 sons is A positive, B positive and O positive. Even if we leave positive, negative, we have 3 blood groups which we have A, B and O. And we have just now seen that they can only have A or B. They cannot produce a child with O blood group. That means the child with blood group O, which they have, that child must be adopted. Okay, that child must have been adopted. So they have asked you what is the blood group of the adopted son. It is AO positive. Very rightly said by all of you. Perfect answer. I'm really glad you've understood this. This option, see, look at the last one. Some of you would have the tendency to get tilted. Cannot be determined on the basis of the given data. This is given to confuse you, and that's why positive negative is also given. It has no relevance to this question. Positive negative के बिना भी आपको पता है कि O cannot be their child. So you have the clear answer, right? If the question was all 3 children have O blood group O, or sorry, blood group O तो चलो हो नहीं सकता. If all 3 children have blood group B, then it would have been a problem. Then you would have said कि cannot be determined. But in this case, it's clear cut. This positive and this last option has been given to you to fall so that you can fall into that trap. But do it on paper, solve it through a cross, don't fall into the trap. That's my advice. Okay. Answer is A, O positive. And you can very well do this for your own self also. Okay, I'll give you my example. So both my parents have blood group A. My blood group is O. Okay. So the possibility of this happening is when both my parents are heterozygous and they both can give me O. Right? I have another friend of mine who says that one of my parents is blood group O, the second one is B, and my blood group is AB. And for the past so many years, every time I meet her, I tell her, तुम लोग तीनों अपना blood group check करवाओ. Something is not right. Where the hell is this A coming from? That is, something is fishy in this story. So basic inheritance, basic paternity can also be determined by the help of blood groups. This is not fine, but you make sure that you check this for yourself. You'll find this to be very interesting. right? We're going to end our class here. I'll tell you what else we need to read, what you can add into this. So from your NCERT, you can read, there are some chapters on reproduction, you can go through that just to give you some basic idea. We'll be using those concepts further also. So class 8, you have chapters 9 and 10. 10th chapter is on adolescence. It talks about hormones. Then we have not completed a lot of concepts further of genetics. So maybe next time I'll tell you genetics wala chapters. And in class 11th, there is one chapter on hormones, which is your chapter number 22. So if you want to read further into the hormones or the diseases which are there, you want to take an overview, you can take it from here. Next class mein, we will start with sex determination first, then the main topic will be genetic abnormalities. And we will do the different technologies in biotech. So let's end our class here. Thank you, Sangeeta and Ajay. We'll meet again in the next class. Thank you, all of you. Have a nice day.